Calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting. It is Tuesday, April the 5th, 2022, 7 o'clock. May we please have the roll call, Charlotte?
Dr. Chang.
Present.
Mr. Goldman.
Here.
Dr. Harris.
Here.
Ms. Nazzarella.
Present.
Ms. Poland.
Here.
Dr. Steinberg.
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson.
Here.
Student Representative Andrew Maglio.
Present.
Student Representative Avery Woods Weber.
Present.
Thank you. And now we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Andrew, please. Thank you. We do have a revision to the agenda order and proposing or suggesting a motion to revise the agenda order due to the length of time anticipated for the budget discussion and other agenda items. And with that, proposing to, following public comments, to then have section item number 7B for non-staff communications via reports from student board representatives to then follow that. Once the student representatives have given their update, then to proceed with the agenda as noted with unfinished business and so on and so forth. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you so much for your flexibility. Now moving on to public communications. This is an opportunity where we're able to hear from the public your thoughts, your suggestions, your concerns. Each individual has 3 minutes to speak, and there are 21 minutes per subject matter. As you are speaking, Charlotte will hold up a card, a yellow card, to let you know that you have 1 minute remaining in your time. And when your time has expired, you will see a red card. Now, it is very important to remember as you come to the podium and once you give your name and your address, that those who are speaking, as well as those who are in the audience, we require for comments to be made in a respectful way. This is a Board of Education meeting. We have students who are here, students who are watching, and it is our collective responsibility to model for them appropriate behaviors, and that will be entrusted upon all of you. So we certainly look forward to hearing your comments, and we will attentively listen to them. Now, it is board policy that we do not respond while comments are being made, but please know we are listening, and we again look forward to your respectful delivery of your comments. We have a list here of several who have signed up, and please know that because it is 21 minutes per subject, if we do get through the 21 minutes, we do have public comments at the end of the meeting as well, and we certainly welcome to hear comments at that time also. First, we have Anita.
Hello, my name is Anita Kellyan, and I live at 48 West Normandy Drive, and my topic is the budget. As we know, it's been a long call here. On February 15th, I submitted a FOIA request for West Hartford Public Schools documents that would substantiate the figures presented on the West Hartford Public Schools 2023 budget. At that time, I asked for contracts, financial details, and titles for the categories of, and they're termed objects on the budget, workbooks, test materials, instructional improvement, and textbooks. All of these documents, and this is an example of what I received, are at the corporation of the Corporate Counsel for the Town of West Hartford. So anyone who's interested, you're more than welcome to go look at them. These are public. But what I want to bring and what I handed out to the board members are the last page for textbooks. And if you see the total for it, it comes out for the fiscal year 2021 to 2020, to 2021. If you see the total, it says $475,000, $27.73. Now, there is a discrepancy because of this paperwork that they gave for substantiating it. for the budget that they present, on a combined, they have it as $504,000. And for the general fund, $500,000. At minimum, that's about a $25,000 difference, which is not substantiated in the documents. I would also like to add, for anyone who wants to do what I did and put all those numbers on those 4 pages on an Excel worksheet, you will actually end up with a total of $439,000, $510, and that gives you a discrepancy of $60,000. As board members, you will be voting. So the question is, you had 2 weeks. I was here on March 23rd, starting to show the discrepancies. Have you had the opportunity to look into what I have been taking time to look into? Because though they presented, the responsibility falls on you. A yes vote means I did look into it, and I can confirm that these numbers are accurate. A no vote would definitely more say to someone like me, hey, I'm not sure, I need to look into this a little bit more, because discrepancies are coming. The last thing that I would like to bring to your attention is that on March 31st, there was a $3 million grant and aid given for the tennis courts. And I am curious to know if one of the board members would ask WHPS, where is that going to show in the budget? And with that and my red card, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Addie.
Good evening, Addie Lord, 561 Park Road. I am here tonight to speak about the budget. Tonight is meant, after all, to be about facts and figures. 2 weeks ago, I received the results of my FOIA request for financial information regarding assessments and shared my preliminary concerns with you all. I am not the only resident and parent to raise concerns regarding the financial information used to prepare the budget. We are coming into the last quarter of the year, and yet I received very few invoices. 2 quotes, one of which is from the previous fiscal year, and I hope was paid, and no contracts as requested. I expect that all members of the board have done their own fact-finding and checking. As elected agents of the state, it is an expectation of your position by residents that you would have done so with due diligence. If you have not done so, then you cannot make an informed yes vote and need to vote no. The subject of public relations was brought up by Member Nezzarella to promote the great things done by the district and teachers. And a budget of $100,000 was mentioned as previously suggested to be included in future budgets. It was also mentioned that we are the only district of our size, etc., without a public relations department or firm. It wasn't very clear what we were talking about, in-house or outside PR firm. But Greenwich, with a similar district to ours, doesn't actually feel the need to have a PR firm. Connecticut ranks in the top 3 in the nation, and West Hartford is upper tier in state for investing in our young students at just under $20,000 per student per year. Given the fact that Mr. Chang has stated that the district is underfunded in many news articles, and our teachers are still putting their hand in their own pockets, perhaps we should look closer at the figures. I'm sure parents and especially teachers would appreciate that $100,000 invested in education rather than public relations. Perhaps in trying to source teachers for Middle Eastern languages. It was mentioned in the same meeting that we have an even larger population of speakers now. Will the $27,000 given by the tribes also go to education or into some dark hole? If our students are to compete on the world stage, this is a wise decision, as many nationalities work in Middle Eastern countries and for Middle Eastern businesses, my own family included, living in Dubai. Or maybe towards translators to help teachers and parents communicate more effectively for their students, given our diverse population of ESOL families. Please consider all information presented from all quarters. Out of a town budget of $318 million, close to $185 million is for education. Let's make sure it all adds up for every student's benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kyle.
Hi, my name is Kyle Zelazny. I'm a registered independent and local attorney, and I'd like to make some comments on the SEL curriculum. This isn't a political issue. This isn't supporting tolerance or diversity. This is simply the incorporation of gender and sexuality theory into the education of kids who are incredibly underdeveloped physically and mentally. And when parents and concerned community members oppose this, we're labeled bigots and transphobes, even though most, if not all of us, support the right of a mentally and physically developed individual to follow their preferred sexual orientation or gender. You claim to be doing this in the name of tolerance and diversity. West Hartford already has and embraces an incredibly accepting, diverse, and tolerant culture. From my perspective, it is the administration before me that is closed-minded, singularly focused on tolerance to such a degree that you cannot see the harm and inappropriateness of the curriculum for young kids. No kindergartner is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. No kindergartner is heterosexual. They do not have the required hormonal or brain development or sexual inclination. They do not care if somebody has two gay or lesbian or heterosexual parents. They just want to hang out with friends, play games and sports, and learn art and music. They do not want, and their parents do not want, schools to engage in an existential discussion with elementary school kids about sexuality, gender identity, and sexual orientation. Parents want their young kids to learn how to read, write, and do math, to be kind, respectful, and treat others how they want to be treated. Any kid truly suffering from gender dysphoria should be given the greatest level of care. This care and support can be provided by the school and community when the kid reaches an appropriate age. Kindergarten and elementary school kids are not at the appropriate age. Allow kids to develop and make that choice on their own, for themselves, without being influenced by teachings on sexuality, gender identity, and sexual orientation at an inappropriate age. If you truly wanted to be transparent, and if you truly had the best interests of the children in mind, you would have sent a letter to every parent in the district, giving them a fair opportunity and notice to discuss the highly controversial notion of teaching their 5-year-olds gender and sexual theory. These types of conversations should occur in the home with the family unit, with their parents or guardians, not the classroom. You like to say, don't mess with trans kids, but it seems to me you're messing with everyone's kids. In conclusion, I believe that the administration before me are wrongly inserting inappropriate teachings of sexuality, gender identity, and sexual orientation in the academic curriculums of kids as young as 5 years old without the consent of the people who care and love their child the most, their parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ellen.
My name is Ellen Nichols. I live on Quaker Lane, and I'm a retired 6th grade teacher. At the March 15th meeting, Dr. Harris proposed a public forum on the new elementary gender identity curriculum. The board, with Mr. Moore's support, voted it down 5-2. Let's go back and look at that. Mr. Moore said similar forums around the country, quote, bring out parents who just want to tell you you are wrong. So apparently a forum would raise too many complaints. Dr. Steinberg said she didn't think the admin team should be put up to the firing squad. Yet you approved and introduced the gender identity curriculum. Who better to defend it? Such a forum could be modeled after the December Human Rights Commission meeting, where Dr. Chang and Dr. Farquharson explained the curriculum and took questions for the better part of 2 hours. But a forum would indeed raise concerns, and here are a few. First, this is not 2 + 2 = 4. The ideas in the new curriculum are not universally held. They are contrary to many people's personal views, religion, value system, and in some cases, science. Next, parents have the right to impart values to their children, not the government. Storybooks that teach 5, 6, and 7-year-old children that they can change from a boy to a girl, or that their sex is assigned or perhaps misassigned at birth, is contended material. Parents want to be the ones to decide if and when to have these sensitive conversations. Remember, parents cannot opt their child out of lessons at school. Finally, the lessons are controversial. It is not mainstream curriculum here or around the country. There is no Connecticut state standard or model lesson to date. West Hartford developed their own lessons, neither vetted nor tested. And there are no long-term research that shows the effect of presenting these confusing ideas to elementary children. Now, to Ms. Nazzarella's comment that, quote, these books are about teaching tolerance, I don't see the other side. There is another side. That is, that people can be accepting and open and still not want opposing values taught to their kids. There are thousands of books that a classroom teacher can use to teach kindness, compassion, and mutual respect. Books that don't also challenge the innocence of a 5-year-old. At the same time, I can also say with 100% confidence that a teacher does not need a book to make any child feel welcome. That is the very nature of the job. Fortunately, we live in a country where an individual is free to be who they want to be and live the life they choose. But that freedom does not extend to writing curriculum. The gender lessons should be removed from the elementary school until they are ratified by parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Scott Zweig.
Just so everybody can see that. Okay. Scott Zweig, 19 Claybar Drive. Good evening, members of the board and residents of West Hartford. On March 15th, the Tribal Council of the Schaghticoke Tribal Nation approved a resolution consenting to the respectful use of names, images, and symbols that recognize the history and culture of Native Americans. This resolution is important for several reasons. First, it was adopted by one of the 5 state-recognized tribes in Connecticut and therefore has unquestionable credibility. Second, West Hartford now has the written consent required by Public Act 21-2 to retain the names Warrior and Chieftain and obtain the funding from the Mashantucket, Pequot, and Mohegan Fund. And finally, and most important, the Board of Education now can hear directly from one of the Connecticut's Native American tribes who publicly supports the continued use of Warrior and Chieftain. I had the opportunity to speak with Chief Richard Velke of the Schaghticoke Tribal Nation on Friday. He said that he received numerous requests for tribal consent for the use of Native American names and images in Connecticut schools. According to Chief Velke, the Tribal Council adopted a broad resolution so that all schools across Connecticut could continue to use names like Warriors, Chieftains, and Red Raiders. For example, the town of Derby worked directly with the Schaghticoke tribal members to ensure that the names and images, like Red Raiders, would be considered respectful by the tribe. Chief Velke has also expressed interest in coming to West Hartford and working with us to accomplish the same goal regarding our use of Warrior and Chieftain. The most powerful thing that Chief Velke said to me during the conversation was that the current eradication of Native American names and images from our schools and teams is another genocide of the Native American people. Genocide. That is the word he chose to describe the elimination of Native American names, images in West Hartford and across the country. Genocide. Chief Velke fears that if all Native American names, images, and symbols are erased from our society, that the Native Americans, along with their rich history and years of sacrifice, will be forgotten. Chief Velke confirmed what many supporters have been saying for years, that many Native Americans feel that these names serve to honor and respect the long-standing cultural traditions and contributions of Native Americans in this country. If Native American tribal members in Connecticut tell us that they are honored by these names and wish to continue using them, then who are we to challenge them? I urge the Board of Education to invite Chief Felke to the April 19th Board of Education meeting to discuss West Hartford's use of warrior and chieftain and the Schaghticoke Tribal Nation's position on the matter. It is time to revisit this issue. The Board of Education wanted input from Connecticut's Native American tribes. Well, now they have it. The Schaghticoke Tribal Nation supports our continued use of warrior and chieftain. It's time to listen to what they have to say. I also want to announce a petition that we have to support and save the warrior and chieftain names. If you're interested in supporting it, please contact us at hallconardunited@gmail.com. hallconardunited@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lisa.
Hi, my name's Lisa King. I live at 9 Danforth when I'm here locally. I grew up in West Hartford, and I went to the school system here, and I have many friends and families here now. Currently, I'm living in Santa Monica, California, so I'm here to speak on the SEL curriculum because we implemented that curriculum probably at least 6 years ago. And I mean, I'm a registered Democrat. I've always voted Democrat. I voted for that. Well, I didn't vote, but I was aware of it. But we didn't really let parents know. I'm a clinical psychologist in Santa Monica, and I just want you to be aware that this isn't really working out as we intended. And I've heard other people talk about, yes, of course we want to instill kindness and respect, and that is the goal, but I'm not sure that the goal is being met through the curriculum that we started. So I just wanted to implore you to really look at what you're trying to do and how you're doing it and what might be the negatives of the approach. Maybe talk to other places that have been doing this for much longer and other cities, other states, and see what the downfall is, and maybe you could improve on the curriculum or the prototype. One thing I've watched a couple of the other board meetings and the one with the Human Rights Commission on Zoom, and one thing I noticed is when we're talking about this is that there was a population of people that is never mentioned, and that population is the neurodiverse kids. And those kids are really suffering from this program, and that's what we're seeing in Santa Monica. So neurodiverse kids, I'm talking about kids with ADHD, kids with autism, kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. They struggle socially, and they struggle to be seen in school. And they are the most bullied kids and left out and abandoned and isolated kids on this planet. And they get a hold of this, and they're all deciding, okay, that's what's wrong with me. I am in the wrong body. I am trans. And then they get a lot of attention, and they're suddenly seen, and they love it. But these kids who already are struggling in the world to get along, and their parents who have been struggling to help them all this time, now have an extra problem that they don't know what to do with, that no one told them about, and no one, helped them see how to work with their kid with this. So I just want you to consider that and think about it and talk to other cities and states and find out where you can improve on this and make sure that you're meeting your intended goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have John Moss.
Good evening. My name is John Moss. I live at 46 Hilldale. I'm the parent of 2 students in the district, one in elementary school and one in middle school. I am here this evening to speak in strong support of the district's work to update their social emotional instruction to include topics that help students to learn to treat everyone around them with dignity, respect, and acceptance. And that's really what this is about, teaching kids to respect and be kind to those around them. Learning about the identities of people in our community helps us to understand the world in which we live. This benefits all students. It makes more well-rounded students who are prepared to be members of a broad and diverse community. Our students will encounter peers who have different gender identities than others. It's not an issue of if, it's an issue of when. And in many cases, it's happening at an early age. So shouldn't we be teaching our students in a purposeful, consistent manner rather than on an ad hoc basis? That logic seems to be accepted for all other areas of our curriculum, so shouldn't it be here? When a child doesn't see themselves reflected in what they see and experience in school, their connection to the school becomes more brittle. It sends the message that their identity doesn't have the same value in our community as other people who see themselves or people like them reflected in instructional content. It doesn't take condemnation to make someone feel unvalued. It happens when someone is told, either by explicit messages or implied beliefs, that their identity should be kept concealed, quiet, and out of the way. Some have suggested that the discussion of some of these EDI topics, such as race or gender identity and other matters, might make some children feel uncomfortable. We must remember that learning and growing is not always a comfortable process, and feeling somewhat uncomfortable is not necessarily indicative that the content is inappropriate. If that were the case, nobody would study the Holocaust or other characteristically unpleasant topics. Some of our most important lessons in life, whether in the classroom or outside of the school, are anything but comfortable. And it's worth remembering that learning to be able to cope through an uncomfortable moment is itself a key life skill. While learning about some of these EDI topics may be challenging at times, it pales in comparison to the trauma that a child feels when a classmate, friend, or loved one ends their life because they feel alone, isolated, and unvalued. That will have a far greater impact on our community than a quick discussion about how some people prefer a particular pronoun or see themselves differently than we might think. Unless someone feels that I'm being overdramatic, let's be clear, this isn't rhetoric, it's reality. Tragedies continue to happen constantly across the country because some children see themselves as broken, something to be ashamed of, or someone not deserving of respect and love. If we can take steps to stop this, shouldn't we? Everyone wins when we send the message that West Hartford students are valued, accepted, and respected. So let's continue to support our great schools, our amazing educators, and most of all, our outstanding students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jill McKelvey.
Hi, I'm Jill McKelvey, and I live at 30 Mohegan Drive. My family and I love West Hartford. My wife and I moved here before we became parents. One of the reasons we wanted to live here is its award-winning schools and educators. My wife and I are committed to partnering with our child's educators. We value education and want the best possible outcome for our child, which is why we bought our home here in West Hartford. Of course, reading, language, math, science are critical to a growing mindset, but so is social-emotional learning. Why? Because it focuses on truth, respect, honor. These are all values we value and instill in our child and purposefully seek out areas of overlap in our child's life, like school, church, sports, friends, and community. SEL teaches the essence of life, which is relationships, knowing how to empathize with others, with other people's experiences or truth, actively listening to others, interacting with others respectfully, and honoring others' differences. Being acknowledged and affirmed is life-changing and life-saving. Differences matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Marcia McCracken, pardon if I mispronounced your last name.
Hi, I'm Marcia McCracken. I'm at 50 Fairley Road. I want to speak related to the social emotional learning. I believe that all curriculum regarding gender identity for K through 5 should be removed. It is none of our business what a child thinks or feels about their gender. I feel that it is a violation of their personal privacy to force them to participate in these topics. It also takes away some of the carefree innocence of childhood. If it is important to parents that their children be exposed to this material, they can introduce it themselves. Disney and other children's media are already integrating this topic. Public education doesn't need to cover this when there are other means of exposure at the discretion of parents. Adding curriculum for gender identity also causes division in our West Hartford community. We have residents who are for this and those who are against it. Education has been around for thousands of years. Without this curriculum, we do not need to add it now. I watched the Board of Ed meeting for March 15, 2022 on this matter. I was disheartened to see the Democratic Board of Ed members vote no to having a forum with parents. Going forward, I would like to see the curriculum for West Hartford be transparent and created with the participation of West Hartford citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. And before calling the next speaker, just to know in terms of our subject matter on social emotional learning, again, we have a cap of 21 minutes per subject matter. If the next speaker is speaking on SEL, that will be the last comment on that subject matter. But again, we do have public comments at the end of the meeting as well. Next, we have Kathy Davis.
Hi, my name is Kathy Davis, and I'm a mom and an educator here in West Hartford Public Schools. I came here 17 years ago because West Hartford had one of the best non-discrimination policies in Connecticut. I was raised in southwestern Virginia at a time where being queer was a death sentence, and I lost many friends because of the stigma of being who we were. I became a teacher in a time when I could be fired for who I love, and my kids could have been taken away just for who I was. Well, when I looked for a place, I came here because of that one line in a non-discrimination policy, and I'm so glad that I did. As Margaret Chase Smith, the first female senator and U.S. representative, said, the right way is not always the easy way. Standing for right is unpopular and is a true test of character. Well, we have always stood for all the members of our diverse West Hartford community. It has been hard and continues to be hard, and I thank you for standing by our social justice curriculum in these hard times. It is so appreciated. You don't hear what a great job you're doing because the people who are happy with you don't show up to these meetings because we trust you and what you're doing. And so you don't get to hear from us as often, and for that I'm sorry, and I wish we were doing better. The social justice curriculum just teaches people to treat each other with respect and to talk about our differences with love so that we can understand each other. It gives kids a language to discuss the things they notice are different and to be able to communicate with each other and understand each other. That's all it does. It gives you the tools to talk. To paraphrase Sally Ride, the first American woman and the first American lesbian in space, young people need to see role models in whatever careers they choose, just so they can picture themselves doing those jobs someday. You can't be what you can't see. And I never knew a place like West Hartford existed when I grew up. Well, thank you for helping our children be seen and to see themselves fulfilling their dreams, all of them. And one last little comment, being the mother of a neurodiverse child, they are perfectly capable of understanding how other people are different than them and want other people to understand how they're different from them. And there's nothing in our curriculum that I don't find appropriate for my child.
Thank you. The next several names listed here identify their topic on SEL. So again, we invite for you to speak at public comment at the end of the meeting. That would be for Larry, Phil, Ted, Graham, and Vicki. Again, we welcome your comments at the end of the meeting. But here we have Kristin, who I believe is speaking on, you'll share your topic. So Kristin.
Hi, my name is Kristin Burns. I live at 24 Riggs Avenue. I'm here to talk about the ancient Greek at Conard High School, which is being discontinued starting next year. So my son is a junior at Conard, and he currently is in Honors Ancient Greek 3. And out of the blue, Greek was canceled, and I understand that was because Mr. Coleman is retiring. Excuse me. And I talked to Mr. Hines, and he advised that there was no plans in place to allow the children that are currently in the pipeline to continue that course of study, which makes it really difficult for those students, especially the students in their first or second year, I'm sorry, who need a foreign language in order to apply for colleges. And I spoke to the superintendent's office, and I would just ask this board to ask Conard to look into ways to help those students complete that curriculum. I can understand not offering it to incoming freshmen, but to allow the students that are in Greeks 1, 2, and 3 to finish out that 4-year course of study.
Thank you. Thank you all for public comments. Again, we do have that at the end of the meeting. Moving on with the agenda to unfinished business. We now will have the adoption of the 2022-2023 Board of Education meeting. And the recommendation will be that the Board of Education review the superintendent's proposed budget in the amount of $181,328,975,000, make revisions as necessary, and adopt the 2022-2023 Board of Education budget. So now we will have... Oh, pardon me. Thank you so much. Yes, before we get into that hefty topic of the meetings, we did revise the agenda. Thank you so very much. Out of respect for our young people, we certainly want for them to attend to their studies this evening. So we're going to have our updates from our student representatives, starting with Avery. Pardon.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. So to start with, at Hall, the spring show Medea has begun rehearsals. Medea is an ancient Greek tale of revenge and women's empowerment based on the Greek myth of the sorceress Medea and Jason. Hall DECA is holding a financial literacy scavenger hunt for April Financial Literacy Awareness Month. 10 winners will be chosen to receive a $50 credit to the school merchandise store. Tickets to junior prom are now for sale, and the junior prom will be held on May 7th. With National Honor Society, the class of 2023 will be inducted on April 20th, and there's also going to be a blood drive on April 27th. And the new mascot name has been narrowed down with the options moving into the final rounds. We haven't received, last it was the quarterfinals, and there are about 8 options. I believe now there will be 3 options released to students in the coming week or so. And I'm sure that the name we choose as a community will reflect our school spirit. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Avery. Andrew.
Conard is currently having a number of drives for actually very disparate things. DECA has partnered with the Environmental Club and the Conard Earth Day Project to create an egg carton drive throughout the school. Also, one student took it upon herself to organize a Conard drive of collecting backpacks filled with toys, Band-Aids, books, honestly anything that could be useful in a school to send to Ukraine. And also the Conard Current is having a book drive for the YWCA, and that's running until April break, with the other 2 running a little bit after through April. Conard also participated in an equity summit along with Hall and Farmington last week to plan for an upcoming larger statewide summit with more schools, and at that one different ideas were discussed for what could then be discussed on the statewide level. So out of that, ideas like code switching and how men of color can help women of color, cultural assimilation, those were the predominant ones. And then also spring sports have started. They started 2 weeks ago, and now they're getting into full swing. Boys volleyball, boys tennis, boys baseball all won this week, and a number of sports teams are having their first matches this week. Girls tennis plays for their first match tomorrow, if it doesn't rain. Also looking ahead, Chris Herron is coming back to Conard. I think some people will remember him. He came about 5 years ago, and he spoke to the whole school at that point. For those people who don't know Chris Herron, he was a professional basketball player who now gives speeches on mental health and substance abuse. And I know Conard has a very robust Herron Project Club. He now has a club that works with high school students. So I think I'm very excited. I think everyone else is very excited to hear him because none of us would have been there for when he came 5 years ago. And that's on April 26th.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Avery. All right. And now we will proceed in the agenda to unfinished business, the adoption of the 2022-2023 Board of Education budget. We'll have Ms. Hewitt, Dr. Murrow, and the whole team to come before us. And so if I may, as things are getting prepped up, just want to share again, and certainly speaking to our colleagues here, which we are well aware of, this is one of those items that the honor is bestowed upon us in our role as Board of Education members. We know that there are primarily three pieces that we are responsible for as board members. One of them is in terms of our superintendent, the other certainly is issuing policy, and the other is the budget. So tonight's piece certainly is one that is significant, and look forward to discussion, ultimately to getting to a place of voting on the budget. And so with that, we know what was initially proposed, but I'm going to pass it to Ms. Hewitt to continue on further, please.
Thank you very much. So as you know, the superintendent's proposed budget was the amount that you had mentioned when reading our resolution for this evening. What we have for you tonight is a spreadsheet where we will keep track of any adjustments that you propose, and as you vote on them and they are either adopted or not adopted, our number will change so that you can see what the running total is for the budget that you will adopt this evening. So what you can see here as we start with our adopted budget for 21-22. We have the proposed budget that the superintendent proposed, and the increase, as well as a percentage increase of 2.8%. Any amendments that you make will show here. We'll keep our running total and our running percentage increase for you. So I turn it over to you to propose any adjustments you have or to answer any questions that you might have about the process.
Certainly. Thank you so much. Want to see in terms, well, certainly teammates want to hear your suggestions, your thoughts, but also in terms of recent information learned, in terms of modifications and how that may apply here. Team referring to the pension. And Liz, may I pass it to you? Or?
Of course. So we recently received our actuarial valuation report for the town pension plan. The measurement date was July 1st, 2021, and it is calculating the required contribution for the upcoming fiscal year. Based upon that analysis, we are able to reduce the budget for the upcoming year by $177,000 based on the results from the actuary.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question on that?
Yes.
177 from the 181, 328? Or?
Correct.
Okay.
And so as we begin going through, just want for you all to think, recognizing that there will be, or there is an intent for there to be $177,000 less than, for us to proactively think of how we can think of that in terms of the ultimate budget that we come to. In other words, proactively looking to see where we can account for that 170 less than in terms of our decision making. But opening it up, please, to questions, comments. Ethan, yes.
So I want to follow up on a point that was made during the recent town comments. In the budget, there is 4 years of Greek. Is that been pulled? Because I do think we owe a commitment to the families that I feel bad for a kid in his junior year all of a sudden being told So I don't know what you're planning to do.
A point of parliamentary inquiry,
I'm
please.
sorry.
Sorry, through the chair. Do we need a motion on the floor first
I was
before
just-
we begin discussing the budget in depth?
Well, where we are now is discussion. If there, a motion for proposal to add or to take something away.
I'm sorry, no, a motion about the budget in general, a motion to review and make revisions as necessary and adopt it, and then we would make amendments to that motion?
I don't believe so, only because this is continuing from previous discussions. The initial motion was made initially, and having the workshops, and so right now where we are is ultimately, when it comes to voting on the budget, a motion at that point in time, and certainly intermittent suggestions to add or subtract, we'll vote on those motions, unless there is a difference of thought.
Thank you.
I apologize, it was meant to be a question. So I guess my question is what happened to the ancient Greek? Because it seemed pretty compelling when you guys were doing the budget workshop.
It's not a budgetary item. It's a question of having a person there to teach it. We're not offering Greek because of budget. We're
No,
not
I
offering
understand.
because we don't have somebody to teach it.
So I guess my question is, if that person wasn't there, that's a savings. However, I would hate to think we're,
It's not a savings because the kids that would have taken that will take another course.
okay. I guess I don't know if this is the right place or time, but I would.
It's not. We don't respond to public comment. That's been the
No, I know
practice
that,
since
but
I've
I'm
been
just
here.
saying, for those kids, yeah.
We take care of the kids. We meet with them. The school counselors meet with them. This has come up with, we don't even know about a full retirement yet. We don't have papers in yet, so it could shift at this point. So we're saying this based on projections, but people aren't obligated to retire until later in the year. We've got to but we haven't even made the decisions yet, because until the budget is passed, we don't allocate students to classes and we don't build our schedule until that point. So right now, there's nobody that's not in any class, and there's nobody that is in any class. That happens later.
Questions, thoughts, pieces in regard to the budget, items you want to look to add, take away, what your thoughts are? Deb.
Sure. I was trying to respect my fellow board members and give somebody else a chance first. It's ironic that today is National Librarian Day and I'm making this proposal, and I love librarians. I do. But we have a vacant position at the high school, and I would propose that we eliminate that vacant position. And Liz, can you tell us what savings that would give us?
Certainly. When we look at salary and benefits, the reduction would be $120,000.
With that motion, is there a second?
I second.
Discussion? All those in favor of eliminating the vacant library specialist position, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. Other items? Yes, Ari.
So I know we just created a savings, but I would like to propose, after our few budget workshops and also during the last meeting here, given the need of our special ed population, I would like to propose that we add an additional supervisor in special ed.
Is there a second for that motion?
Seconded. Jason?
Discussion?
So
Ethan?
my question is, how would that fit into the current structure? I mean, you're adding a position, is it going to have a different report? I mean, I'm not sure how it fits in.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify, Ethan, when you say fit into the structure, how
So
will we
you're adding
utilize it?
another supervisor, and I'm trying to go back to the notes of the question I asked before that came back, is you currently have 6.
Correct,
So this would be number 7.
correct. That's
So would that be, you have X amount of people reporting to each, or?
Yes, so our department supervisors are currently separated across all of our 16 buildings, including an additional building that's housed on ASD campus, Cogswell, to support our Strive and post-secondary transition program. One of the reasons that we have the need for the increased supervision is due to the increase in needs with our student population. If you think back to one of our last board reports where we showed the increase in students that we have topping out at 1,500 students, our department supervisors are responsible for the individualized education plans across the district. And so currently, those 6 individuals are responsible for all 1,500 individualized education plans. So this 7th person would support that caseload. They would also be managing the supervision of our clinicians, our special education teachers, our related service providers like OTs, PTs, teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing, and any other related service providers who provide services under the individualized education plan.
So just so I understand, because reading through it, it seemed like there's like 100 students that are they part of those?
That is correct, yes. And one of the needs, as we separated the caseloads, one of our department supervisors currently oversees our out-of-district student placements, which is at 108 right now, in our private schools and magnets. So students who attend a parochial school here physically within West Hartford Public Schools, we're responsible for the IDA provisions, and that means that they have private school service plans. So if they physically live in Berlin, but they attend a parochial school here in West Hartford Public Schools is actually responsible for the provision of IDEA as it relates to private and parochial schools. So it's our case managers and department supervisors that actually oversee that process, so that one individual right now is overseeing approximately 300 individualized education plans.
Thanks.
Yep. Other discussions? Yes, Gail.
Thanks. Firstly, I wanted to really commend all of you and our superintendent for putting together this budget, which is just, just a work of art. It's just amazing how much time and effort go into it, and I really appreciate all the detail. My question on going into what Ari proposed is, why, if we've put together a budget, and I know there's been a lot of work, it would seem to me that what's in the budget is what the district would need. And I'm not clear why we would be adding in other things if you didn't ask for that initially. And I don't know who can answer that, but I think, I hope you understand what I'm saying. It seems to me that you put a lot of work into this and you asked for what you need. So why now would we be coming and adding things in? Thank you.
That's a good question, Gail, but I think it's important to note, and I think Melissa explained, and Tom certainly explained when we were at the budget workshop, that she did ask for this, and this was something that was considered, and we operate and set a budget also in consideration of what can and should be appropriate as far as moving forward with our tax base and understanding the resources we have available. So there's always things that we cut from it, and that was something that was cut, and there's a huge need for that. As you've seen, the mental health needs of our students are increasing on a daily basis, and we're stretched thin with that, and we'll continue to be, especially operating within the IEPs next year.
Yes, Gail and then Claire.
Thank you. We did get these extra ESSER funds, and I would have assumed that, a large percentage of the money that we did get for ESSER funds would have gone towards some of the mental health needs of our students. So it would seem to me that that would be playing into some of these extra costs that we might need that weren't able to be put into the budget, but could be possibly funded through the ESSER funds.
One of the limitations to the ESSER funds is their short-term duration funds. So it wouldn't be a permanent funding, and there's a step down. So some of those funds start stepping down as soon as the end of next year. So for that reason, ESSER funds are not a reliable source for us to access these types of positions.
And the other piece is then 092, which is the administrative degree in special education, isn't that common necessarily for people to move into the position. So the applicant pool, if it's going to be an interim for 2 years and then they'd be out of a job, that would limit the ability for people to apply for the position in the ESSER funds. But because it is something we looked at with using the ESSER funds for this too, as we have in other areas.
I also just wanted to comment that I feel like a lot of our ESSER funds were used for mental health issues, and they're not going away, and they're actually increasing. So I don't think that this is irrelevant to the fact that we already have put a lot of our funds towards mental health, and yet we're still struggling. So that was my contribution to the discussion, because I think this is a valued position and and it's a necessary position if we're going to continue to provide the high-end special ed services that we offer and that people move to this town for.
Claire and then Jason.
So I think this, the increase in special ed identification, the new EIP system, the potential of outplacement, the amount that the people currently, the directors, are managing is quite substantial. And in some ways, better coordination, less of an overworkload. There's a lot of things that could, in the end, save the district money. If you mismanage and overload this critical of identification, the paperwork, all the legal requirements within this group, and with it growing at the rate it is, nationwide, we're seeing an incredible growth in special ed. And when the ESSER funds leave, it's even more important that we have a well-organized system. So I support this position.
Jason. Jason and then Avery.
Claire said everything I was going to say.
Avery.
And my story is quite the same. But I did want to, just for context on Mrs. Nasralla's comment, do you have any way that you can help us understand how adding another People Services Department supervisor will help balance out that workload and what that'll look like for students?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. So as we look at our department supervisors' roles, they're working to do two things. One, they're looking at managing the compliance for federal and state obligations and laws. And secondarily, and most importantly, working to ensure that students' programming is appropriate. And in order to do so, they need to have the time to be able to meet with teams, to observe students in their classrooms, to be able to see the students in their active learning environment, to be able to coach teachers and professionals and to provide oversight. And so this would allow me to reallocate their roles so that they can be doing that important work of physically being in the classrooms and in the schools to see student programming.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Other questions regarding the motion that's on the floor? Comments? All right, we'll move to vote. All that are in favor of adding a Pupil Services Department supervisor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? The ayes have it. All right.
I did want to mention, even though the first adjustment is administrative in nature, you do actually need to adopt that in order to amend the amount and to get that reduction.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So with that then, is there a motion to support reduction to the town pension contribution?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Other pieces to add or take away from the budget? Right. So Liz, oh yes, Jason.
Sorry, this, so I'd like to make a proposal to change the allocation of federal funds. It's not a reduction, it's a budget neutral shift. Is this an appropriate time to do that?
If you can share, yes, and then we'll make a motion and we'll have to second and yes.
Okay, great. So I do have some visuals to share with you. So just bear with me while I walk through this idea, okay? So our federal funding is designed to support education, classroom education. in response to the challenges presented by the pandemic. So when we made our initial allocations of these federal funds, we suspected what might be the needs of the district for this year and the year ahead. So we know a lot more now about the needs of our students. We know more now than we did then. So I'd like to make a proposal to reallocate funds in light of the needs of our students as well as our teachers. So during our meeting on October 19th, 2021, the district made a presentation on the state assessment results for grades 3 through 8 with some sobering realities. For high needs students, from the year prior to the pandemic, 2018-2019, 55% were below grade level achievement for high needs students. In 2021, the 2021 year, those students who were mostly remote or fully remote, 78% were below grade level achievement. And that's just for ELA. In math, we have, prior to the pandemic, 73% of high needs students were below grade level achievement. In the 2021 year, those who were fully or mostly remote, 89% were below grade level. There's a widening gap between high needs and those without high needs. So our students need more attention from caring, well-trained adults in these immediate years, now, to keep our obligation to provide the best education to every student. So there's also the issue that, families who chose fully or mostly remote for safety reasons are faced with some challenges for their students and shouldn't be penalized for making decisions based on health. So adding instructional support at this time is crucial to enable a deliberate recovery and also to surpass the prior levels of achievement. While high needs students in West Hartford Public Schools do better than the state average, we should not be satisfied with a more than 30% gap in outcomes prior to the pandemic. So adding instructional staff and support staff is important at this point to relieve the day-to-day burdens on current teaching staff, spreading the work among other teammates, meets the children's needs, and wards against the conditions of fatigue and burnout. So we also need to make sure we're adequately staffed and responding to mental health needs. And this position, the Pupil Services Department Supervisor, is an important addition to that. But there continues to be high intensity stress and trauma endured over the last 2 years. So when we meet these needs of students, we're able to support learning for these challenged peers. So this is just a beginning proposal, right? I expect there to be dialogue, and I really love to hear your thoughts, the executive team's thoughts on how best to reallocate some of this money. And I'm talking about the student activity fees funds. Now let me say, before I say anything else about this, that I don't think parents should be paying student activity fees. I was trying to think of a really good analogy for it, and I can't. The closest one I can come up with is like asking soldiers to pay for the military, but that doesn't really fit. So in addition to, there's 3 parts that I'm saying. I want to reallocate funds. I want to have a step down in funding for student activity fees. And I want to initiate annual increases of $100,000 every year until we have student activity fees covered in the regular budget. So the ESSER funds at this point give us this capacity to do classroom work and to care for our students in the schools. But we also have this opportunity to move through this, what we've provided for in student activity fees, right? And it's good for us to have a plan for reducing that cost to families in the long term. So, let's see. So I have tables to share. Here, why don't you pass those down? Part of my thinking around the student activity fees is that in the 1920 year, 2,868 students participated in student activities. In 2021 year, 2,434 students participated. I'm sorry, this is high school sports. This is high school sports. The 1920 year was 2019-2020 school year, 2,868. This is high school sports. 2,868. In the 2020-2021 year, 2,434 students. Okay? And then it was estimated for this year, 2021-2022, 2,500 students participated. Right? So the thinking behind providing for student activity fees is that through the ESSER funds was that this was to reduce the barrier of entry for students so everyone can benefit from this. And indeed, we've seen this, with record participation from our sports teams, incredible theater productions, musical performances, art shows. Student activities produce incredible value for our community. Incredible value. And we shouldn't be asking families to bear that burden. It's difficult, as we can see, to add $100,000 into the budget. But if we valued it enough to think that it was necessary to recover from a pandemic, I think it's necessary to do that on a permanent basis. That's why I've added to my proposal for using ESSER funds, not just to reinstate activity fees for families, but to include a mechanism for us to add incrementally those fee costs, right? So perhaps I've said too much, but this is a first draft that I want to pass by you guys. Hear your thoughts, questions, happy to respond. Thank you.
So thank you. So if you may give a motion, but a shortened motion, and then we'll get a second, and then we'll have the discussion at that point.
I make a motion to reallocate the student activities fees do I have to give the years?
You can.
Can we clarify?
Yes, please.
Sure.
So we're not able to commit funds or appropriations for future years. So with the plan to phase in $100,000 per year for the 4 years after 2023. We can agree to that in principle, but we cannot actually commit those funds at this point in time. So what we would want to do is make the motion for anything that will affect either the general fund for the upcoming year, or in general, if you wanted to set rates or propose reallocating ESSER funds.
If I'm understanding you correctly, so the ESSER funds are just a lump sum that we've planned out and expressed in our plan how they would be spread out over a 3-year period. In effect, what you allocated last year by board vote was 1.8 million? Am I right? No, 1.2. What's the number?
For pay to play, it was
Yeah.
1.2 million. We had assumed
Yep.
over 3 years, it would be approximately 400,000 per year, as you have detailed in your current column.
So 1.2 million of our ESSER proposal has gone in under replacing pay for play. We don't necessarily say by years, that's our plan, so we can step down and know how things are going through. So really what you'd be doing is looking to allocate, we've already spent 400,000, so basically 800,000 or some variation of it, you'd be looking to reallocate, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So how does that happen through the motion? What is the mechanism?
So possibly to suggest to move to reallocate $800,000 of the student activity fees.
But I think if I'm reading your proposal correctly, you're kind of doing a step down
Yes.
in the pay-to-play fee. So
Yes.
prior to us covering this under the ESSER funds, the fee was $175 per sport with a cap of $700 per year. So if you wanted to, step that down over the course of 2 years, for example, maybe we would charge families $100 per sport next year, and we would cover the other half through ESSER. And then, if I'm reading this correctly, then the third year, we wouldn't use ESSER funds at all, so we would go back up to the $175 per sport, with the proposed offset of $100,000 if adopted as part of the annual budget process.
Yes.
Do I have that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
So from a motion standpoint, I think that we need to do a couple of things. I think you need to reallocate or propose reallocating $600,000 of ESSER funds. And we need to make a motion to adopt a certain rate for pay-to-play
Okay.
with a cap as well. So if it's going to be, half of it is $87.50 per sport, but that's kind of an unusual amount, so I would recommend something rounder. So if we did 100, and then again, we would have a cap per family. I'm sorry?
Just doing
This
the
has
math.
no
There's
impact
no
on our
impact
general
on-
fund budget.
No.
Well, it will on the athletic fund because we're replacing the ESSER money.
Just with revenue from parents.
But we're
Yeah, you're right, because it doesn't affect your output. You're right,
It
Mike.
doesn't
Yes.
affect the general.
But it's like you're creating a slush fund. But you don't know where the 600,000.
No, it's the same as we've always had for pay for play, so there's an athletic fee account that always goes towards uniforms, officiating and
No, no,
everything else, so it's not
I-
a slush fund we've had.
You mean
I'm
the
talking
use
about
of
the
the
money that got
600.
moved, the 600,000
I think Jason has some
plans.
plans for that.
Right, so the plan is in the motion for the 600,000? Okay. So I'd like to raise a motion to reallocate 600,000 for the purposes of hiring paras or counselors, tutors, one in math, one in English, or reading, sorry, and one trauma interventionist. Now, I estimated these salaries based on what I could find in the budget. These may be off. And these would, with that 600,000, would be able to fund those positions over 2 years. Right? So that's where the reallocation is.
If I could just clarify, if I could ask the team about the allocation, and if they'd want it split over 2 years, or if you'd want to taper just as hopefully the needs become less acute over the next 2 years, and that perhaps you're using more of it next year. And so it's not positions that you necessarily spread out over 2 years, but maybe you do more of a triage model next year. I don't know, Paul, Melissa, if you have initial thoughts, Melissa or Paul, either one.
You know, we've had a lot of discussion, you know, I think we're really starting to see the impact of COVID on our youth in this moment in time. And there's an interplay between what you're kind of noting there with the test scores and the impact that it's having on the academic for a variety of reasons. It could be what students' experience was over COVID. It could be the social emotional impact impacting their ability to access the learning. Either way, we see that there's two very strong needs, be it in education and accessing the curriculum, and then also with SEL. And I'll let Paul speak more to the curriculum components, but, you know, I certainly can justify very easily the need for an additional trauma interventionist at the secondary level. We continue to see very acute needs, as Ari has pointed out, even in the private sector, but we still continue to see that in the education all the way up, but particularly with the middle school and high school students, we're seeing a high rate of risk assessments continued. And even though we have used a great deal of our ESSER funds for additional clinical positions, those clinicians are inundated daily with a high level of need. And it's very challenging. So certainly can justify that very easily. However, in the spirit of being proactive to say, what else can we be doing for our students to keep that level of stress, anxiety, and overwhelm low, I think we can really do more with our academic support. And I'll let Paul talk to maybe what that could look like.
Certainly. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Jason, for the opportunity on this important topic. I think we look at, you know, the models that we have across elementary, middle, and high school, and we've been having conversations about the variety of needs. And to Melissa's point, there is definitely an overlap between behaviors with students, kind of the re-engagement, specifically for students that were in the remote setting perhaps for a year's time, losing, you know, you're really losing the year of norms, the year of maturity, the year, you know, it's so you're, you know, we hear this time and again at every single level. A significant number of students are coming into the school setting and, you know, socially, in terms of their social norms, their emotion, their ability to deal with stress, they're a year behind. So I'm coming in, I'm a 5th grader, but I kind of act like a 4th grader. I'm coming in like a 9th grader, but I'm kind of acting like a middle schooler, and so on and so forth. And even this late in the year, surprisingly, we still hear that. So, and it has an impact on their academics. So we're looking at a couple of things. Currently within the ESSER model, we do have, say, within the area of mathematics, we do have the coaches that at the secondary level, and which was replicating a structure that we had at the elementary level. Those coaches help dramatically in terms of the academics with the engagement in the classroom, with the professional learning for the teachers. So they're helping our teachers to get better working with kids in terms of how do you make that lesson engaging, exciting, dynamic, something that kids are active learners in versus passive learners. The trouble I think that we're having more frequently is in the re-engagement, just in the behavioral components. So the trauma interventionist has been a model that exists at the middle school level, as Melissa just said, something that we're looking to replicate more broadly, just perhaps an additional person, but also perhaps at the elementary level, something like a school counselor, something like that counseling model where we can be working with children to help re-engage them, reacclimate them, have greater touch points, have a more, say, consistent mentor, so that if they're having episodes or if they're having struggles, we can kind of give them a soft landing spot, work on the skill that they're struggling with, send them back into the academic setting. We do have the tutor support. We have plussed up tutor supports through ESSER, so we do have that academic need that's currently built in. We have probably, just with the hiring troubles that you all remember we've been dealing with since the beginning of the year, not necessarily been able to fully realize the number of tutors that we can afford under ESSER, and that's one of the things as we get to our to our annual periods where we reevaluate our expenditures and look at our needs. It is an area where we would continue to look at adding more tutor support to the school, but I don't, I think if I were thinking at the elementary level, I think we would potentially be looking and talking about a 2-year change. We might be looking more at counseling type support because we have the avenue for the tutors.
Yeah, so as I think of it, Jason, not to step on it because you can motion it however you want to, since none of these votes are additions as that is to the specific budget, these are shifts to our ESSER plan, which we'll have to change and submit to the state. So really, we don't have to go to this step yet in terms of what I think people have a general understanding about what we add. The problem and the benefit of size is that we get a large amount in ESSER, $400,000 as a shift here. We'll certainly use trauma interventionals, thing like that. The problem is if you split it up because of our size amongst our elementary schools, 2 pairs across 11 places doesn't, if you're doing pairs, tutors, and everything else, I'd rather us have a chance to come together with more of a proposal to you for, I mean, we have talked about this idea for years, and we looked at it in the ESSER funding in terms of next year really having a focus, on the trauma interventionists, because we may have some ESSER offsets that we have to use differently anyway, because as you said, we proposed it, and we're going to be making motions, which every district should be making shifts to how they're using ESSER as they react to COVID over time. But something like this with 400,000, and I'm doing it off the top of my head, you could have 6, 7 school counselors at the elementary level. That maybe then you're splitting time 2 days a week, 3 days a week, depending on the size of the school, which I know our elementary principals would all think that would be a great thing for a kid when they are having an issue and either going to the principal's office or waiting or anything else, to have somebody on site, another, that's not the school psychologist, because that may not be the appropriate intervention at that point, but somebody else that can do the counseling component, the second step component, those things. I don't know if I'm, like, I would just, before you propose that, we can talk about it more and maybe come back to the board table, because we'll have to anyway with the amendment to ESSER, and maybe put that before you if that money were reallocated with 600, because we'd be looking at 600,000 reallocated over that time, because that would be a shift. So I really think your motion is to reinstate pay for play however you would and reallocate $600,000 into ESSER that had been removed for pay for play. Did I misspeak, Liz? I don't want to.
No, I think that's exactly right, and we don't need to be as specific tonight about how that reallocation will occur. But we do need to set a rate for pay to play if we decide to reinstitute a fee.
And Paul, Melissa, Andy, Julia, do you agree about how to propose that over time?
At first, I think any of these positions would be worthwhile, but I think to Tom's point, which is a really good one, is that with 11 elementary schools, to really be able to have an impact in the way we'd want it to with use of this funds, if we're reallocating them, it would behoove us to look at some different models, and we can certainly kind of put our heads together and think through some different proposals to kind of bring forward for consideration. But I do like the idea of using school counselors to supplement our clinical staff to serve as another intermediary to provide supports for students who might not have specialized programming, that might just need an intermediary and more proactive way of addressing maybe some of those needs that students might have that come up across the day. Claire,
pardon me, you all said, Jason? Pardon.
I just wanted to add that this, I really appreciate thinking through this on the fly with us, and to, hear the different ways that we can use these ESSER funds in this moment now, where where the impacts are so, the younger the student, the greater the impacts right now. And the attention to the elementaries and the scope and scale of that is, greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Claire?
Yeah, I just wanted to check, your high needs population that you saw the change in, is that special ed or not necessarily special ed?
I think that this is, let's see, high needs is defined as those students with individualized education plans.
Okay.
English language learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged as identified by participation in the free and reduced lunch program.
Right. So what I feel that it's very hard to keep up with the RTI program, especially with all the changes and all the struggling that the kids are doing. So both behavior and academically, I think it's good to put a big effort in there before these kids become identified as special ed. And so I know what it's like to try to manage and do those cycles of intervention and keep the data. It's outside of the special ed, but there's a large pocket of our population that's not identified, but that's struggling. And the teachers are, again, trying to manage such a diverse ability level in any one classroom. So I think it would be great to get some more of that support on an elementary level.
So just to thank you so much for this, and just we still have a partial motion on the floor. So just want to first get a clear motion on the floor, and second, we've had discussion, but formally have discussion, and then we can proceed.
My understanding of where we are is that the allocation is a secondary step, that what we need to do at this point is to propose a fee, a reduced fee. So I think that's the first step in this. Yeah, okay. So I make a motion to reinstate pay to play at the rate of $100.
Is there a second?
Hold on.
Oh, pardon.
Is there a family maximum? Is the family maximum previously set? People have 2-3 kids playing multiple
Yep.
sports.
The current cap,
The current is,
so it was 175 previously with a cap of 700 per family.
Mm-hmm. So that's
I guess it was 4,
400?
yeah.
Okay.
It was
With
4
cap of
sports, so
400.
yes.
Okay, 4 sports. Well, yeah, the motion is for $100 and a cap of 400.
So just to be clear, the motion is to reinstate pay to play at a rate of $100 per child with a cap of $400 per sport.
No, per family.
Per family. Per
But
family.
no, instead of per child, per sport.
Yes, it's $100 per sport, a $400 cap per family.
All right.
Right?
We'll state it again. Reinstate the pay to play at a rate of $100 per child per sport at a cap of $400 per family. All right. Was that your motion? Is that what?
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Claire, if I could respond to your, just going back in time, no child has ever, we don't know if a child never came forward before. That is an absolutely fair point. But we try to make it clear, we continue to tell people, anybody that's on free and reduced lunch is automatically waived from any fees for sports. And we also tell any child that you have to tell somebody by face if they can put a note forward to the athletic director, to their coach, to the principal. Payment is not something we're going to keep a child out of a sport for, just so that's clear.
Claire?
And back to my prediction about free and reduced lunch, are we anticipating it being covered by the federal government the lunch is being covered? Because I believe that population will grow. And they're going to grow because the stigma's been removed. A lot of people didn't apply that might have benefited from applying. And now they all enjoy the lunch. And I think there's going to be an increase.
There may be. The federal government right now still has not committed to next year in a bill that would have brought that forward. It's been blocked right now, so it would appear right now that we'll go back to the old way of doing free and reduced lunch next year, and we always try to get families to apply and make sure that any child that needs this across the district, it's a constant kind of advertising discussion theme with families, starting at the elementary level going forward. So, the numbers going up wouldn't surprise me.
And you remove any hurdles that you anticipate?
We try to do everything we can to make sure. We try to reach out to families. We try to make sure, we try to publicize the issues. We try to make sure that kids aren't stigmatized by it in lunch lines. We try to make sure we do everything we can in a setting of a cafeteria with 400 kids at a lunch at the high school.
Gail.
Jason, so I'm just curious, and I understand the whole idea of we wouldn't deny anybody playing a sport, but again, some kids may not feel comfortable if they feel that, I have to go ask my mother for $100. They may just shy away from playing. Do you have any sense of, out of these 2,500 kids or so that are playing sports, how many of them may not play because of the fees associated?
Well, I think Tom's comments indicate that there's every means of accommodating any need is made. No one has been turned down, and with 100% of the fees covered, fewer students have played sports. So,
but that could also be
sure,
because there's
COVID,
less students,
exactly.
there's COVID, there's
Sure.
all kinds of other things.
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate your motion, and I am certainly somebody who would support, more instructional types of things in the school. But I also think that, the families are suffering now as well. I don't think it's, as much as we talk, we're a Board of Ed, we talk about what goes on in the schools. There's raging inflation, gas prices are out of control. The real estate in this town is basically sky high. And we've all seen letters come through to the Board of Ed of people who were basically been forced to move out of the town because of all of the costs. So I also worry about the costs to our families, and even though these numbers aren't all that big, it may negate some kids being able to partake in these sports just because they don't want to, have to ask their parents for money that isn't there.
Yes, Jason.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I really deliberated over this and to really think through how this will impact families. And the way that we have it set up now is that there will be zero cost for the next 2 years and a full reinstatement in 3, right? So my plan is not just to turn the spigot off and make families pay more now. My plan is to reduce the fees for the long term so that families don't ever have to pay for it again.
But, somebody does have to pay for it, so if families don't pay for it, somebody else is going to have to pay for it. So,
Right.
The money has to come from somewhere.
So what I promise to do is every year I will make a motion to add $100,000 to the budget until all fees are covered. That's an incremental increase of $100,000 such that it becomes a part of the recurring budget of the district. So that would, in 4 years, or what I put in here is by 2026, the fees would be fully covered in the budget. in the regular budget.
So
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but you have I'll go, you go
Well,
ahead.
I have a couple things. I'm good to go? So, two things. One is, I think I have a problem taking away the activity fee. I think it's important for kids. I've learned not to be sarcastic here, but what about other activities like drama? You know, parents could say that. But that aside, we don't know where the money's going. And I appreciate your saying, you'll add to it every year, but we always are going to have barriers. So my counter suggestion to you, looking at this, is we're approximately 100, assuming we stay where we're at, we're about 140,000, give or take, ahead. Why don't you do that and maintain, and then that way the 400, kids still aren't paying.
Right.
But you put 140,000, assuming the town council doesn't cause us a curveball, all right? Because I'm just very uncomfortable saying we're going to have and it's my choice of words, so I realize nobody else likes it, it seems like a slush fund that we're going to figure out, and I realize that's not what it is, but I'd rather see something like that and keep the kids whole, or the families whole, because I do appreciate the town will cover them. I'm the treasurer of the West Hartford Soccer League. We cover kids. But I don't think that many families or kids are going to come and say, and it may be different for the for the town leagues, because there isn't the school lunch program definer, but I would prefer if we could do something like that. I'm willing to do that, but otherwise I'm just voting against everything, because to me, I think it's good to have kids play sports. It's good not to have some kind of limitation. It may only be $100, but as Gail said, who knows what's happening with the economy, and it's not getting better, it's getting worse.
Just to clarify for us, so.
Sure.
It's okay, no, it's valid points. So-
I was shooting on the fly.
No, that's okay. So if I understand right, what you're proposing would be to leave the pay-to-play, that it's being funded by the board through the ESSER funds, so that there's no cost to parents, and allocating the excess, or what you've currently identified as the excess, the 141 to 41,000 to interventionists for next year. Is that what?
Whatever.
Okay.
I don't want to say here's where it should go, because.
Sure, no, I just wanted to make sure we were talking
Yeah.
the same, okay.
But that would be based on, assuming the savings stay there.
It wouldn't, no, what you'd actually be doing is allocating funds to replace pay for play, and that money that's freed up you'd be allocating budget funds to go for athletic fees.
Right.
And then those athletic fees that are offset automatically would revert back to ESSER, and we'd make the shift to our ESSER plan. That's the
I'm
way.
just trying to keep
I
the
understand.
kids whole,
No, I'm just trying to make it clear.
or the families whole, I guess.
Yeah.
Claire?
So I'm just curious, you got permission to use the ESSER funds to pay for sports fees, and those were considered ESSER funds to help with the academic impact of the pandemic on the students?
It's the social emotional impact and the idea of sports, music, arts. There's a section of the ESSER, as the law was passed, that you want students engaged, you want them taking part in after-school activities, you want to re-engage them in the schools. And so that was part that the board voted on. We wrote it up as part of our ESSER plan, and that was approved. Every year, we'll be sending in amendments to the ESSER plan. I'm not advocating or not advocating, I'm just saying that's what's going to happen every year of ESSER, because we had to make guesses that we'll be putting this much towards this factor, but it turns out we need more than that. So we're taking from something else, and we'll resubmit to the state, which allocates the ESSER funds. It's already allocated to us, we'll reiterate how we're using it.
But we keep talking about the ESSER cliff. And this ESSER cliff is you get 100%, you have to pay all the fees when the ESSER funds runs out, or ESSER funds helping kids who have been hurt academically and maybe getting them to a better place. So you've got a cliff no matter what. You're taking away your support and tutors and interventionists, or you're taking and making the parents pay the fee, but that cliff comes.
Lauren, if I could just follow, so what this would do Jason, it would allow you to start the changing to the pay, eliminating the activity fee, but also still give you some money for whatever comes back, which we don't know yet, or unless you have that proposal. So it's just trying to find a way to keep it, the activity fees whole. So, thank you.
So I appreciate the discussion, and what I'm clearly hearing is that we certainly recognize the benefit of the activity fees being compensated because our students benefit from it. It's promoting social emotional engagement learning. That certainly is, we all are in agreement with that. And I also am hearing and appreciate, Claire, you reiterating that the reality is, as things stand now, inevitably in 2 years, that provision will no longer be available to our families. So that's a reality. What I'm hearing with the proposal, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's also addressing the reality of the need at this time, in addition to promoting our social and emotional engagement with our students, but the needs at this time in addressing the mental health, social and emotional challenges that our students are experiencing right now because of the pandemic, and the proposed ways that additional supportive services can facilitate with that. I think we're all in agreement that that is, we've heard that many times, many presentations, that is an inevitable known that we know. So it's a matter of how to respond to both. And what I'm hearing, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is the proposal on the floor is one that involves concurrent planning as opposed to just sequential. It's concurrent in that recommending reinstating the pay-to-play at a rate of $100 per child per sport with a cap of $400 per family, with also there being discussions of how to utilize ESSER funding and how to reallocate that. And so that's where the concurrent planning comes into place, which, according to the table you have here, helps to pave a way so that come 2 years from now, where things as they are, there's no supporting activity fees. But with the proposed plan, things would be in place at that point in time to support a slow titration where ultimately there is plans by 2026, 2027, where it is a part of the budget where activity fees are covered 100% for students. Is that what? Yes. And so with that, I'm hearing, I'm hearing concurrency, I'm hearing proactive thinking, I'm hearing addressing needs, and I appreciate the discussions that's supporting that. And I see the value in what's been proposed. Again, it's not a sole elimination of, it's a reallocation of in support of trying to maximize the funding, recognizing the immediate needs that our young people are experiencing at this time. Other thoughts, discussions? Yes, Deb.
I strongly oppose this proposal. We last year had a robust discussion around this. And the discussion then, and I'll bring some of it back now, and there's even new research in the interim since then, is that participating in physical activity, participating in music, participating in art is healthy for people. It promotes learning. It promotes engagement. It promotes positive social emotional status. And this is, I think it's wonderful that we are able to provide social workers, counselors, and a variety of other resources towards that type of support, social emotional learning. But I think we need to recognize that research shows that there are other ways that can also promote good mental health. And exercise and physical activity are some of those ways that also promote good mental health. We also are trying to make sure our kids feel welcome, feel that encouraged to participate in our activities at the middle and high school level. And this is a way that we can remove a barrier because, as we said, we know that no one has ever been turned away when they've asked for help. We don't know how many families aren't even having the conversation where, the kid comes home from school and says, "Hey, Dad, I'd really like to play soccer." And Dad says, "We don't have the money for it. Do something else. Go get a job or just study more after school." So we don't know how many families that impacts. And this is just one way that we can help ensure that there isn't that barrier. I also think it is important for us to recognize that this is a way that we can directly help families in West Hartford. This is money basically back in their pocket. And yeah, there's going to be a cliff. And that means in 2 years, families will have to pay $175 per student per sport with a $750 cap or $700 cap unless we make a change. But until then, I don't see why we would ask them to continue to pay money when we have a plan with special federal funds that are designed in part to help students re-engage in the school setting to ensure that families do not have to pay those fees. So I would strongly oppose this proposal, and I would ask my colleagues to join me in that opposition.
Yes, Ari, and then Gail, yes.
So I completely respect your viewpoint, Deb. But I guess the way that I look at it, and actually an area of interest and research for me in my profession is actually the impact of physical exercise on the mental health of children and adolescents. So I completely support that argument. I guess when I look at this, and I think I had expressed this when we went through this the first go around with the ESSER funds, that and I think, Tom, you even said, like, when you go from asking people to pay everything to paying nothing, it's going to be really hard to get back into that swing of things. So I actually like the idea of some level of titration for families to get used to participating. The other thing that I think is a lot of our students participate in sports outside of school. There are a lot of opportunities, extracurricular, town sports, so that while, yes, we are supporting families by providing the cost for pay to play, we're not at the same time, if we reinstate a reduced fee, we're not negating physical activity opportunities. Kids can go and take a walk around the neighborhood. Like this doesn't limit the opportunities for physical activity and exercise. But I do see in Jason's proposal, by continuing the path that we're on with the ESSER funds, we are basically negating the opportunities for kids with regard to potentially having a counselor to support them. Those are things that they can't get outside of school, whereas physical activity and exercise and moving their bodies is something that they can, we're not negating the opportunities, but again, if we are negating opportunities for academic loss, to gain some academic standing, we are negating the ability to access additional mental health supports within the schools by continuing on the path that we're on. So that's just my viewpoint on this.
Gail, and then Andrew.
Yeah, Jason, I just, could you just repeat the motion, because a lot of different things have been said here, and I just want to make clear that I understand what exactly you're proposing. If you just say it like succinctly.
Yeah, the proposal is, or the motion is to reinstate pay to play of $100 with a cap of $400.
And then you said that that would not take place for 2 more years? Is that?
Yeah.
So it would happen immediately? Next year?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, next year.
And the $100,000 a year in the budget, that's not in your motion?
No,
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
This is just for the fee rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Andrew.
I'd just say, listening to kind of the back and forth, I think that Ms. Steinberg, you bring up a very good point that counselors really, one of the best ways and possibly one of the only ways many students can access them is in schools. I just say, from like my perspective as a student, I know that for a lot of students, sports in schools really aren't the same as sports outside of schools. I know I participate in tennis, and I know at least the tennis program at Conard, the way my coach runs it, it's no cuts, and he's been coaching actually in West Hartford for multiple decades, and he has created a culture where he reminds us that he still gets phone calls from people who are now adults who say that they've given up playing tennis because really the reason they played tennis wasn't to play tennis, but it was to be part of that Conard sports community. And I just know from my personal experience that Conard sports are real, and Hall sports probably too, are such a huge part of so many students' lives, not just for the physical activity or having something to do, but really because so many people find that community that I think is so important. And I think we keep going back to that idea of community and belonging. And then I think, again, Ms. Pullen, you bring up a very good point of we don't know how many people having any fee has precluded the conversation at home about. So I would say I think that whether the fee is $100 or $175, that could already eclipse so many conversations of students who don't feel like it's accessible. And I would just ask you to do anything and everything you can to make sure that those conversations do get to happen. And if that's not having a fee for the next 2 years, then I think personally that's what should be done.
Avery.
I really do appreciate Andrew's comment. The one thing that I would like to add that I find particularly impressive about Jason's proposal, and that I think needs to be acknowledged, is how it balances these two methods of improving social and emotional health for students. Because Jason's proposal, like Ari said, allows students to access something that they would not otherwise be able to supplement with other activities, while providing some support for families with, if a further motion was passed, long-term being able to negate those activity fees long-term, so that our reality, hopefully in 5-6 years, is that we don't have activity fees, and that those students who right now have these acute needs can access guidance counselors. I think I think that that's an optimal solution to balance these two needs. And I don't think, no, I think that that's something that really needs to be acknowledged here.
Thank you. Through you, a question actually for Tom. When we've had this conversation in the past, I've asked about whether we can just automatically allow students on free lunch to get a fee waiver. And I believe I was told that we could not share information from nutrition services with any other department or division of our system, and therefore we were not able to automatically provide a fee waiver.
Yeah, we can't share the list of students on free and reduced lunch. It's basically only run by cafeteria services, which is why so it's not like we can notify kids, hey, you don't have to pay. With that being said, listen, this discussion, it's not a question of being caught in the middle. I am 100% against pay for play, always have been. I don't think schools should charge for that, as I've said in the past. But I also want all of those counselors that Jason mentions also. So, no, I do think, answering honestly, I do think we're very good at identifying kids and not keeping kids out of the sport. And I'm not arguing for a point. I'm just saying, as the school principal, as a former coach, that's something. Ethan, you mentioned the youth soccer league, and that's the one thing I guess that mitigates it in my mind. Again, I don't have a position on this one. This is the essence of a budget where you're going through and there's no good choice other than increasing the budget. That would be my vote, but I don't get one. And because $100 is cheaper than all the youth sports leagues charge. I mean, it's just comparatively, when you look at what you get for the $100, it's 12 weeks of a sports season with 2 full-time coaches at least, maybe 3 full-time coaches, referees, officiating, buses, transportation. So just in terms of it, it's not exorbitant. There are districts charging $700, $800 in pay for play. That's the only thing I wanted to say in terms of that, which I know nobody's advocating for.
Thank you for that clarification. So in follow-up, I do think it's important for my colleagues to realize, whereas we do offer in town a plethora of sports at the youth level, by the time you get to high school, if you are a girl who wants to play basketball, if you are a kid who wants to swim, if you are a girl who wants to play softball, there are no opportunities during the school year for these activities outside of a premier, high-level, multiple-hour, multiple-day commitment per week, expensive sport that is only good for people who are extremely good at that sport. And there are, I will say, I think there's a boys basketball league that goes up to high school. There are a few sports that you can play at the high school level, even if you're not like one of the best kids in town. But particularly for girls, those opportunities do drop off. So if you don't make the basketball team, you don't have an opportunity unless you're, you can play JV usually, but not even always, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I think providing sports at the high school level in a way that's accessible to students and to families. And again, I'll go back to what Andrew said. It's part of making our students feel part of the school community. This is a small thing that we can do to help families right now. We know how great the need is in town. Of course, we've seen the property revals, and we expect that there are going to be some disproportionate tax increases depending on where you live in town, and that is something that we're trying to take into account. And by keeping our commitment to not have pay-to-play for families this upcoming year, I think that's just a small way that we can help ensure that our kids get to participate. And I am very willing to work in future years at trying to find a way to cover this with our regular general fund. And that's what I would propose, that we look for ways to do this in the future outside of the ESSER grant.
And
but for this year, to leave it as is.
just to clarify and support one of your statements, you are correct, especially about female sports in town. And the other piece is that's why we have several no-cut sports per season, so that any child that can't, it's hard to make a basketball team in a 1,500-person high school. So that during that season, there's also indoor track, or there's other sports that a child can go to that's an athlete that we want to be engaged in something. So just to clarify the point.
Right, so any other comments with that? Yes, Jason.
Yeah, I just want to thank my colleagues on the board, Tom, for your comments and context. Very much trying to balance multiple needs going on. And I personally completely agree with the difference that physical activity makes. My watch tells me that I swam 54 laps this morning in preparation for today. So it's that physical activity that is a part of my wellness routine. And I know that to be true for children as well. I just want to reiterate here the need for students with high needs. A majority of those students who were fully remote or mostly remote are not at grade level. Not at grade level. We need to try as hard as we can to make sure that when they get to high school, they can use those sport activities in the same way that kids today can. Now, I think this is a balanced approach that pulls kids up where they need it, in school, in the classroom, provides some relief and a much lower cap, $400, while we work on the board to devise a permanent solution to eliminating activity fees for good.
So with that, we'll call on, Ethan,
Yeah,
and then,
I don't question Jason's intent or motivation, but there's a big difference from having, if we pull the activity fees or we make the parents pay, we're going to have the same problem next year of adding back. So unless you do some kind of modification, I'm with Deb. I just think the sports is important. I think even if you force kids into, families into, they choose one sport, not the other sport, I just think that's a bad situation to get in. And, I'd hate to see this go away, so.
all right. So calling now on the vote. Again, the motion on the floor is to reinstate pay-to-play at a rate of $100 per child per sport with a cap of $400 per family. All of those in favor?
Can we do a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, yes. So, Charlotte, if you may, the roll call, and we'll state our vote.
Dr. Chang?
Yay?
Mr. Goldman?
No.
Dr. Harris?
No.
Ms. Nezzarella?
Yes.
Ms. Pullen?
No.
Dr. Steinberg?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
Yes. So the motion passes. All right. Any other thoughts, pieces regarding the budget? Looking at what so far has been moved and passed in terms of the budget, we have some reductions here. So the number we are looking at, we can see right on the screen there. Other thoughts? Young people, thank you so much. Thank you.
I propose we add $200,000 to the budget to eliminate the newly reinstated pay-to-play fee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Deb, if you can repeat once again your motion.
Proposal to add $200,000 to the budget, or whatever the actual amount would be, given that we didn't actually make it in half, right? So a proposal to cover the portion of pay-to-play fees that we just eliminated from ESSER.
Liz, if I'm correct, that'd be about 225,000, correct?
Should be a little less if we went to $100 instead of 87, right? Or
100 to a little more you need.
right, a little more. Yep.
Okay. Discussion. So in essence, what I'm hearing you propose in terms of cover the expenses for pay-to-pay fees that were just eliminated. Yes, other discussion.
So would the plan be to continue the additions to permanently cover this in subsequent years?
Well, we only vote on one budget year at a time.
But I think the question, though, is looking, again, with the motion that passed before, it was looking long-term, trying to make interventions concurrently long-term as well. So I think if the question is touching on that also.
Since we only voted on next year just now, I'm proposing we only vote on next year for this proposal as well.
Other discussion. Gail, yes.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. So the $200,000 would go towards making sure that families are not paying any of these fees?
Correct.
Other discussion? Yes, all right.
I just have a question, just to get a better understanding. So we present our budget, obviously, to the town council. They cannot dictate kind of line by line, correct? If there is, what is the decision process that happens next if they say you need to cut $225,000 from your budget?
So if they, all right, so they adopt budget, April 25th. And so at that point, we would come back at the May meeting as we have in the past, and we'd be at this place again where we'd say we have $225,000 to cut. We could either do it as this is what we would do, or we could put it back to you, this is what they would do, and then you'd have to amend the budget in that same, because we have X amount of dollars, and we'd amend it by eliminating something that's in the budget here.
And I don't know if it would be helpful, we haven't adopted it yet, but if we did, we'd be increasing the budget by the amount there, just so you have an idea of what we're talking about.
83.
83,000 in total would be the net of those 4 adjustments.
Line 7 on the budget shows what that does the tally.
So it'd be a 2.9% increase instead of a 2.8.
But since you're playing with ESSER funds, could we take, I know what motion to make after this, so I'm good.
All right. Other discussion points with the motion on the floor? Jason?
Could I recommend a $100,000 increase instead of a $225,000?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Gail?
So I, in general, have trouble accepting a 2.8% increase in the budget in general. And I understand it's a roll-forward budget, and I understand there's all kinds of negotiated contracts that we don't have any control over. But we are in a time where there's raging inflation, housing costs are out of control, gas prices are out of control, there's a reassessment in town. If we keep playing around with the funds one way or the other, somebody still has to pay for this. It looks great on a piece of paper, but, we are putting a burden on the families one way or the other here. And I think we have to be mindful of that. These are very difficult times. COVID has hit everybody, not just the schools. It's hit families as well. And I think that, to be responsible, 2.8% to me sounds high in this climate. But if we had kept the budget at 2.8%, it would be something I could support. And I think that we can't really be in a bubble here. I think we have to realize that families are out there too that have to, somebody's going to fund this. It's not, well, we took it from here, we put it over there, we put it over there, we took it over here. It has to be funded somehow. So either you're going to, raise taxes in town on all the West Hartford families, or you're going to get it some other way that is still going to hit the families. So, I don't know. I have a problem in this climate raising the budget in any way, shape, or form, or taking away funds from families to play sports so that we can use it in other places. I just don't think that that's what we should be doing.
All right, other discussion? All right, let's vote on the motion on the floor. Again, the motion is to cover expenses for pay-to-play fee. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Any abstentions? The motion fails. Pardon me? It was 3, we can do a roll call. 4 were not in support of it, 3 were in support of it. But if we prefer to do a roll call, we can certainly do that. Charlotte, pardon, a roll call, please.
Okay. Dr. Chang?
No.
Mr. Goldman?
For.
Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Nezzarella?
No.
Ms. Poland?
Yes.
Dr. Steinberg?
No.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
No. Other items to discuss, add, or recommend removal on the budget. As of now, as it looks, the budget is a proposed 2.77% increase at $181,187,018.
So can I just make a comment, and the vote already happened, so it's done? But if you generally are going to eliminate or put it into funding the activity fees, then we should have been able to do something with that. It's just an observation, so you take it for what it's worth. I don't question the intent. I just think the execution is going to be very hard to do, and this would have been a way to start. So,
If I may, though, from what we voted on, it is a titration. So for the next year, it's not a 100% activity fee that the families have to pay. What's been proposed, it's still a reduced amount, ultimately getting to a place in future years of where they don't have to pay at all. So I hear what you're saying. Yes, there is an activity fee, but it is a slow implementation of it, recognizing that the way it was prior to the vote, inevitably it would be 100%.
I don't question the intent of anybody. I just question the ability to get there if we can't get there this year, or even start, if we're going to do this. So for what I think, I'd like to see it eliminated, but I'm skeptical. But I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Ari.
This is not to point fingers or point anyone out, but I guess, Gail, if you could clarify for me, what you had just said is you didn't support any increase in the budget, but then voted to increase it by $250,000. So I'm just wondering, like, how are you able to kind of justify that?
Well, I sort of feel like we're playing a game. We're taking money from one place and we're putting it somewhere else. So to me, it sort of balances out. We took the money away from the families who are now going to have to come up with money to play sports. And that, I believe, is approximately that amount of money, and we just put it somewhere else. So.
But I guess by adding it back in, that increases the percentage of the budget increase, which then, as what you said, will actually end up just costing residents as a whole more money. So I feel like it's an even Steven thing, so I'm just.
It's an even Steven thing. It's a wash, right? We're putting it back in one place and taking it out somewhere else.
This is actually hitting the students directly, whereas the overall property tax is throughout the community and spread out. I mean, I could just tell you, I had a lot of opportunities. I had to pay for some of my sports, when I was growing up, which was fine, but somebody's paying.
Yep, I'm taking money out of my own pocket here.
I guess, Ari, I don't feel like basically what I reiterate myself, I don't think this is the time to be adding any expenses to families who are struggling in this town right now. So we just added in $200,000 expenses to our families, and so we tried to refund it through the budget. So to me, it's sort of a wash.
Yep, I agree.
Other thoughts, other items before we put what is currently proposed as the budget up for vote?
Before we do, Madam Chair, I don't know if any members of the board wanted to state
Certainly, yes. We
intentions.
just want to see if there are, any specific other line items that would like to be proposed for the budget. All right, hearing none. We are at the place now of voting on the final budget adoption, again, of an amount of $181,187,018. And so because this is something that's very important in our role, would like to hear from each of you your vote, but also your thoughts, if you so choose, in regard to what you are voting for. So Charlotte, once again, if you could please do the roll call.
I'm sorry, before the roll, I think that there were a few of us who had statements we wanted to make before voting on the budget.
Certainly, yes. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank the budget team and everyone that put this year's budget together. The presentations and the budget workshops were thorough, and I appreciate the quick response that we got on all our Board of Education members' questions. In this challenging time, I'm impressed with the reductions that were put forward and the prioritization of maintaining the high quality of education we offer all students. We're a people organization, and I feel fortunate to live in a town with such amazing education staff who give their best every day to our children. And I understand the negotiations with salary were done prior, but I think it's great the way we support our teachers in the district, and we have an incredible staff. Thanks.
Other comments? Deb?
Yes, thank you. Crafting a budget is one of our most important responsibilities as West Hartford's elected Board of Education. This budget, while imperfect, meets the needs of our students and families while taking into account the financial restrictions that our town residents face. We recognize the growing needs in special education and mental health, We're also seeking to maintain the high-quality schools that make West Hartford a town where people seek to raise their families, both long-term residents and those who have more recently joined our community. I want to also take the opportunity to thank Liz and Tom and the whole team for their work on this budget, as well as my colleagues around the table for digging into the details and taking seriously our fiduciary responsibility. And of course, I want to thank all of our 1,500 plus staff members for their commitment to our students and families and for taking seriously their responsibility in educating our next generation of leaders. I ask my colleagues to support this budget.
Other comments? Ari.
I just want to echo my colleagues' sentiments thus far. I want to thank all of you for all of the work that you put into this, the responsiveness with regard to the budget workshops. And I just want to say, it's a huge ask of you, of us, to really try to balance all of the needs that we know we have within the town and try to prioritize. Everybody has different priorities. I think we've all made that clear in the budget workshops, in this meeting. But I really want to applaud all of you because I think at the end of the day, where we might disagree in certain topics or areas, I really think we're all trying to balance kind of the needs of our students and our families and our residents academically, emotionally, kind of all, this whole model of wellness across all areas. So I just really want to thank you, and I'm in support of this budget. And as Tom had said earlier, I mean, if we could have more, that would be lovely. I think that would help us to kind of meet all of the needs. But I do think for right now and coming out of COVID, it feels very apparent to me here on the board as well as in my professional role that really the priority right now has to be meeting the needs of our students' mental health and social emotional functioning. So thank you for building that into our budget.
Ethan.
So I'd also want to thank those who worked on the budget because I know how much fun they can be, but it's always a good time with them. I was fine with the budget as originally presented. While I would have liked to have seen more reductions or less of an increase, I realized that it was your best estimate of what could be there and what was necessary. I was also fine with the first three adjustments, I believe they were. My problem is with the fourth. I have a strong philosophical problem with that. I don't think it's right to charge families activity fees. I realize that was done in the past, but we had a way to get around it, and I wish we could have done something else. There were ways we could have done a bit more of a compromise, collaborative. That didn't seem to work, so I'm going to vote no on the budget. I realize it's a very small part, but philosophically, I just think it's the wrong move, and I don't want to approve the budget.
Gail.
Yeah, I already thanked you guys before. You guys did an outstanding job. I want to sort of build on what Ethan said. I would have supported this budget the way it was written. I believe that you people are the experts, and what you gave us is what you needed, and I would have supported that. I can't really support some of the things that have been added into the budget, so therefore I'm going to also vote no on this budget.
Thank you. Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Again, reiterate the appreciation for the ground level details and what this budget enables. I'm really excited for the work that will be done with this $181,187,018 is the lifeblood of our community, and I'm grateful for the conversation here, and I think that we can continue to work together for the town, and that we will continue that work day to day on the board. And so I thank everyone for their time here. This is a volunteer position, and it does take quite a bit of time to think through, our work here. So I want to thank each and every one of you for that work, and that we do this work together. Thank you.
Thank you. And I share the thanks that have been shared by colleagues. Appreciate each and every one of you for the robust discussion. And as has been mentioned, even moments when we agree to disagree, it still is good that there is discussion had. That is our responsibility when it comes to talking about the budget. Certainly want to thank Tom and all of you from the executive team in coming up with this budget and giving the reasons and rationale why. We know the past year, but if we think about the time of the pandemic, the past 2 years, goodness, I can say more than 2 years because it's been more than 2 years, has been a lot on our students. And clearly what we see, things that we knew last year, rather things we know now we did not know last year in terms of how pronounced the concerns are. So appreciate the effort that has been made to try to address those concerns now so they don't continue and linger on. Our young people are deserving of that. Our staff are deserving of that as well. And so with that, will be supporting the budget as it is here. But please, let's not be mistaken. Although at the top of this discussion made reference to we have 3 primary roles as being on the board, certainly the budget, certainly superintendent, certainly the policy making. Please don't think that, woof, now we can just relax. Absolutely not. The work must continue on. And so with that, we'll ask for a roll call, please, for the vote on the budget as is stated now at $181,187,018. This reflects a 2.77% increase.
Dr. Chang?
Yes?
Mr. Goldman?
No.
Dr. Harris?
No.
Ms. Nazarella?
Yes.
Ms. Poland?
Yes.
Dr. Steinberg?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
Yes. The motion passes. The budget passes. Here, as we know, it now will go over to the Town Council, and on April the 25th, they will be voting on their budget. We certainly hope they will receive what we have proposed as is, but we will be attentively waiting to see if recommendations are made. Thank you so very much again. Thank you. Moving. Yes.
Question. I'm against it, but does that reflect the added, the 181, 187 reflect the added activity fees?
Yes, but it's not an impact.
You mean was the 225 added in?
That's going to reduce to the budget?
It's not. So you mean because it's listed here?
No, because there was, you're taking 400,000 out of here.
Right, so that's
Or
not
putting
part.
it, adding it here as revenue as opposed to ESCR.
So that all gets accounted for in the interscholastic sports fund, so it doesn't affect the general fund.
Oh, I didn't know you had one of those.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. And moving on with the agenda to new business, appointment of a personnel search committee.
Excuse me, could we do the additional unfinished business?
There is no additional unfinished.
I had one I wanted to put in.
That's at the agenda at the.
Oh, at the end? Okay, all right. That's fine. I apologize.
That's all right. So yes, we are now in new business, appointment of a personnel search committee. The recommendation is that the Board of Education appoint a personnel search committee for the position of superintendent of school. So before we go into that, just want to give an update of why this is even on the agenda. So we all know that at the end of June, we are going to be saying farewell to our current superintendent, Mr. Moore. Again, this is actually your last budget with us, and so thank you so very much. Thank you so very much for all of you've done for the 8 years you've been superintendent, helping us along the way to get to this point. And so I'll save all the farewells and all that stuff for a later time. But nonetheless, we know that we must collectively and concurrently and assertively move forward in terms of identifying a new superintendent. And so that means there's steps that are involved. And as you know from our last meeting, we had an executive session to discuss how are we going to approach those steps. And the intent was to come before you to give an update of where we are. And so I want to share with you that one of the first steps that we want to take is an appointment of a personnel search committee. And this will be comprised of Board of Education members in accordance with our charge, which is to appoint the Superintendent of Schools, as stated by Policy 2120. Again, it's important to remember that's one of our primary roles as a Board of Education member is to appoint the superintendent. So that's the first step we are planning to take, and you will bear witness to that in just a moment. And then the next step is to appoint an interim superintendent. You may have noticed on the agenda later on, we do have an executive session, so our evening is certainly far from done. In that executive session, we want to further look into what that may be, how that may appear in terms of the appointment of the interim superintendent. But please don't be mistaken, we will come back before you after the executive session with an update. So those of you who dare to stay or dare to stay awake and watch, you will receive an update at that time. And then also a next step is to pursue a hiring consulting firm to facilitate the search process. Why are we going to do that? This is a lot of work to hire a superintendent, and it's work that requires due diligence. It requires time. It requires the efforts of many who are able to attend to that, adequately so. So we certainly want and recognize the need for those supports. So we are looking into hiring a consultant firm, and we'll have more updates to you on how that will unfold. But please know that we are looking for, or rather in terms of hiring a consultant firm, this process involves adhering to guidelines associated with bidding policy number 3310. Again, we'll have more details with you as we move forward with that. And then we also have another step, and this is more of a concurrent step. We know that as we move forward, we certainly want to, in collaborating with the consultant firm, whoever that may be, we want to hear from the community, and we want to do this through community sessions. And we also want to ensure that we have a diverse pool of candidates when it comes time to ultimately appointing and electing the superintendent. Also want to highlight that with this process and with us wanting to keep you abreast of where we are in the process, we also know there is some information that we cannot discuss, we cannot disclose, and referring to confidentiality. And this certainly pertains to candidates. As we have candidates who will apply for the position and we look forward to who they may be, we must maintain their confidentiality because they may be at a particular district who may not know that they're looking elsewhere. So because of those efforts, when we give you updates, please be mindful that names and locations of who is a potential candidate, that information, identifying information, will not be shared, but we certainly will keep you abreast of where we are in the process. So again, rewinding to the first step is appointing the personnel search committee. And with that, looking for a motion that the board establish a personnel search committee for the purpose of recommending to the board one or more candidates for the position of superintendent of schools, and moved further that the following individuals be appointed to the committee: Dr. Jason Chang, Mr. Ethan Goldman, Dr. Gail Harris, Ms. Claire Nessarella, Ms. Deb Poland, Dr. Ari Steinberg, Dr. Lorna Thomas Farquharson. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. So with that, we now will move on to, move on to staff communication and reports. Mr. Moore.
The budget's my report tonight. I'll update you on other things next meeting.
All right, duly noted. And staff reports and board discussions, we've had lots of that, so we'll continue on. Routine matters, approval of the minutes, seeking approval of the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of March 15th, 2022. And with that, the recommendation that a Board of Education meeting approve the minutes from this meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? No nays? All right, the ayes have it. Great, great. Now moving on to information and reports. Board members' communications and reports. Reports from other boards and organizations. All right, hearing none. We already heard from our students, so appreciative to them. Now moving on to future business. Announcement of future meeting dates. We have Tuesday, April the 19th, 2022, the regular Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock here in room 314. Then on Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022, regular Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock, once again here in room 314. Followed by Tuesday, May 17th, 2022, regular Board of Education meeting, 7 o'clock, here in the Legislative Chamber, room 314. Do we have a request for a future agenda item?
Last December, a motion was made to change the two high school team names. Vote was held on February 1st with the intent in that time period to get the feedback from three different groups: high school students, the overall community, and West Hartford high school alumni, and the Native American tribes. There was a significant response from the community, hard to say who was from both sides. The response from the high school students, as relayed by the student reps, was definitely favorable for keeping the names as is. The one part where there seemed to be a gap, and not from lack of trying, but from lack of response, was from the Native American tribes. And on the website, there's 4 responses, one from 2015, which is sort of hard to give credibility to, and the other 3, in my opinion, were relatively ambiguous. Requesting we be respectful of them, but not really specifically commenting on the current names. Over the weekend, I know I received a interesting response from, and I'm going to struggle with this name, Scatacoke Tribe. Did I get it right? Really? Wow. Won't happen again. Clearly in favor of keeping the existing team names. I know that we took a vote to change the names in February, but if we are truly an organization, academic organization, focused on educational learning, I think it would be beneficial for the town to invite this Scatacoke Tribe chief, as well as any representatives from the other tribes. I would hope there would be some, to hear what they have to say on the subject. A lot of assumptions have been made in terms of their perspective, but we should actually hear from them. So I'd ask at the next board meeting 2 weeks from now that we invite them and see if they'll come and give them a chance to make their comments and have the board member of boards ask the questions if appropriate. So.
All right. Thank you. Other agenda items, suggestions? All right. Moving on to comments from visitors. Are there any here that would like to give a public comment? We know that we had some who were on the list originally, but we reached the cap, the maximum of subject matters. If those individuals are here, or anyone else who may be here to public comment. Yes. When you approach the podium, please share your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes. And Charlotte will hold up a card, a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining, and a red card when your time has expired.
Thank you. Larry Laser, 29 Ledger Road, West Hartford. So I came here tonight because I was listening to the Board of Education meeting last, I think it was March 15th, and Gail Harris made a proposal, and her proposal was really just to have a forum to discuss the SEL curriculum. There was no sense of any criticism, but I think there was a desire that some of our residents have concerns about the SEL curriculum. And there was a recent poll that came out from the National Parents Union that said about 35% of parents have a significant concern, oftentimes of lower socioeconomic groups. So I just think the board missed an opportunity for parents and the Board of Education to get together and talk more about it. I think parents could learn from you, and you may be able to hear some comments from the parents that may be helpful. It's a new curriculum, and we know we're going to be modifying that over the years. And I think just to encourage that dialogue is important for everybody. There's a lot of good things there. I think we all can probably start with saying we want to create an empathetic environment in our schools for kids who are gay, kids who are transgender, and we all agree on that. And I think part of that starts with this dialogue and having that forum. So I think you should relook at that. Maybe Dr. Harris could resubmit it. Along the same lines, when that was being presented, I guess I was a little bit concerned on the feedback that Dr. Harris got. I thought it was a little bit condescending in some ways in terms of how some of the board members spoke to her. One of the board members said, we're on the side of empathy and caring. What's the other side? I think people can disagree on some things, particularly the youngest age kids. and talk about it. It doesn't mean that either side is uncaring or unempathetic. It just means that some people may have a different perspective. I think our town is a wonderful town. It's incredibly diverse, and there's strong opinions. Particularly, I think you can focus on the youngest age group. And we've seen that nationally, obviously. I don't agree with happening in Florida, but there's a lot of discussion about the youngest age group. And I think a forum gives residents an opportunity to kind of talk about their concerns and then maybe educated by you, and maybe they can educate you as well. So I think, you know, the concern I had is that oftentimes, if you look at discussions, there can be this orthodoxy in terms of what's the current view on how we should talk about things. And if a minority group poses a challenge to that, there's oftentimes, I think attack is probably too much of a word, but there's lots of negativity thrown to Dr. Harris when she was really looking just for a discussion. She wasn't saying we should eliminate it. She wasn't talking about high school or middle school. She was talking about the youngest kids in our school system. So I think we should welcome that. And I think maybe to look at how that discussion took place, because I think that that discussion could have been done better. And I think it's a good role model for Avery and Andrew when they go to college and other kids, that kids are afraid to talk about issues. They have a lot of anxiety to talk about these issues. And if anything, this should be the role model on how we talk about conflicting issues on these things. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other comments that would like to be made? Yes, I saw you, late young, in the back, your hand, and then with the red hair, yes, your hand has pardon. Please.
I'll be brief. Patty Fleming, 34 Linwald. I'm super nervous only because I think just what I'm going to share might, I don't know. I'm really nervous because I don't feel that expressing counter viewpoints to this SEL curriculum is received well. You know, like the gentleman said before, if you say something that you know, you may be raising some concerns, you are labeled not empathetic, not compassionate. I would just like to recommend, this is a little book review. I read a book this past couple of days called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier. And I would just strongly recommend that you read it. I think it speaks to, a lady spoke earlier about kind of the psychological things that have been going along with what's happening in the schools, the major institutions, medicine, psychology, our school systems are really just pushing something that I think is really harmful, in fact, irreversible, and that's what the whole book is about. It's really tragic. We have a 100-year history of gender dysphoria, and what the book points out is that lots of things, lots of really mind-blowing, interesting things, and she comes at it in such a compassionate and compelling way. So I would just ask that you would read it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hello, my name is Graham. I live at 243 Steel Road. So just to start off, I grew up in West Hartford. I was a product of the West Hartford public school system, and big thing I want to emphasize that Andrew, I think, was the first person that I heard really pointed out was community. I had a strong sense of community in this town. We were always taught to be tolerant, and in case anyone's wondering, I'm talking about the SEL curriculum. That's my subject matter here. I think the intention by people who put these books out to read is to promote tolerance. And we would all agree that tolerance is a good thing. But the thing is, I think there can be some unintended consequences with this. And I'm not just talking about what might happen with kids' development, but I'm talking about us as a community. We can already see this is a big divisive issue. And we have parents that are for it and parents that are against it. And I don't think anything less of parents who are for it. And I commend you for coming up, Miss from West Virginia. I forgot your name. I apologize. But I think you said some very powerful stuff, and I think you're right to feel the way you feel about this. And I think, though, at the end of the day, as parents, we should reserve the right to have input about content that is provocative. This is a provocative and controversial subject. I don't think anyone would disagree that this is, jarring some emotions with parents in town. I don't want us to get to the point where we are now not going to be sitting next to each other at soccer games or, shouting at each other at all kinds of extracurricular events. One thing that I knew growing up is that the big issue, maybe some of you remember back in the 90s, was sex education in school. And parents at the time had a lot of trust in school because the schools gave parents the opportunity to opt out if they didn't agree with it. My parents were given the opportunity, they chose not to, but if they wanted to, they could have. Why don't we fix this issue right now and give parents the opportunity to opt out of this if they don't want this being read to their kids? This is a sensitive topic. And if parents want to introduce this to their kids as early as kindergarten, that's their choice. I'm not going to tell another parent how to raise their kids. The first book my kids will read when they get to elementary school is a book about a transgender teddy bear that changes its sex or that wants to change its sex. To me, that's a little too, it's too strong of a subject that I would prefer to discuss with my kids when they're ready. And as Mr. John Moss, who's not here anymore, said, this is something that will eventually, they will encounter at some point. And I think it's up to the parents to when to discuss this. I think you could save a lot of headache in this town if you let parents who do not agree with this opt their kids out of this in school. I think by forcing parents to have their kids have these books read to them, you're going to create a lot of division that's going to last a really long time. I don't think it's good for West Hartford. I don't think it's good for the community. Let parents opt out of this. And if parents want to have their kids read a book about a transgender teddy bear in kindergarten, let them do so. But let parents have a choice. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes. And pardon me, ma'am, to be fair, in the back, I saw that you stood at one point in time. Do you have a comment? No, to your left. Yes, did you have a comment? No, okay, pardon. Yes, and then in the back, yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to be heard tonight. I'm Vicki Coyle. I live at 442 Mountain Road. I support a curriculum that is about inclusivity and kindness for all students, including those students with a different gender identity. I am, however, concerned about the books that have been selected to be in the elementary school curriculum for gender identity. Comments tonight indicated that people were under the impression that the books were about tolerance and acceptance, but I want to read some examples that are concerning to me. In 5th grade, students are read a book called It Feels Good to Be Yourself. Among other things, the book instructs students that when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right, maybe they got it wrong. What a baby's body looks like when they were born can be a clue to what the baby's gender will be, but not always. You might feel that your gender changes from day to day or year to year. We were told that the gender identity curriculum was about how to treat other students, but was not teaching a viewpoint or ideology. But the book I just quoted does precisely that. It is an ideology or a viewpoint that doctors guess what your gender is at birth, and it has nothing to do with how we treat other students. The book should be removed from the reading list. We were also told that the curriculum was about getting rid of gender stereotypes, but the book I Am Jazz talks about girl things like girl toys and girl clothes. This is reinforcing gender stereotypes. Finally, as was just referenced, in kindergarten, students will be read about a transgender teddy bear. No one has offered an explanation, let alone any data, for how teaching a kindergartner that individuals can identify as the opposite gender is developmentally appropriate for a 5-year-old. In fact, there is no data supporting this curriculum at the elementary school level. The only study cited by the district is one study involving adolescents. I know for a fact that numerous West Hartford elementary school teachers do not want to teach these books. One teacher told a parent that never in her career has she been told she was required to teach a specific book until now. Dr. Harris made a simple request at the prior meeting. Let's hold an open forum where parents can get clarity and express their viewpoint on this sensitive and important subject. Based on the number of speakers tonight, which had to go before and after the lengthy budget discussion, I think that just shows that a public forum on this topic is warranted. The state of Connecticut has weighed in and decided that 8th grade is the time to introduce a lesson on gender identity. Without engaging in the community, the district has unilaterally decided that the time to start this curriculum is kindergarten. There needs to be an open discussion about this decision. The West Hartford community should be heard, and the 3 books I mentioned should be removed from the curriculum as inappropriate and not geared towards the goals of the curriculum as explained by the district. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Juan Villamizar. I live at 51 Tumblebrook Lane. Like a lot of the speakers tonight, I believe that this is a topic that needs more input from parents in town. I think it's irresponsible and predatory to our children. But enough has been said about that. I'm going to get a little more personal about what I'm here to speak about. It's about my own stepson. He's currently on an IEP program requiring that he be accompanied with a parent to his recess. And last Friday, he was not accompanied by a parent at his recess. He was taunted by 2 children and caused them to lose his balance. He basically went into one of his conditions. He's got a social condition that I'm sure can be, the system knows about, the principal knows about it. And the investigation was conducted by his classroom teacher, not by an IEP professional or a social or a psychologist. And he has not been in school for the last 2 days because on Monday, he had fears to be at school, and a lot of things manifested for him. And again, we're still waiting to hear from the school, the administration, to find out how we're going to keep our 85% less than where he's supposed to be at child. Because, like the gentleman spoke earlier tonight, I am a victim of my kid being left behind because he did not have the proper support through COVID to meet his education needs. Things that are written in paper were not followed by this system. I need some answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes.
Hi, thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Gitch. I live on 56 Gillette Street. First of all, I would like to make a full disclaimer. I'm not from a well-funded advocacy political arm. I'm just a parent. The reason why I'm saying this is because back in November last year, when West Hartford parents, we opposed the SEL curriculum, Mr. Tamor labeled us as well-funded advocacy political arm in this article. So that's why I need to do that disclaimer. So the truth is, it is the progressive left school administration who are truly serving as a political arm, not we, the parents. In the process, they are destroying the reputation of our once great school system by introducing such divisive curriculum, as we have heard from parents, majority of them. This SEL thing is divisive and it's not doing any good. Lately, the progressive left-dominated Board of Education has been throwing at us, the parents, all kinds of divisive topics, and we are tired of playing catch-up with them. That will change, hopefully, next election when we reclaim our Board of Education. They throw at us the mascot topic, which was really not an issue. Then the mask, now the SEL, tomorrow they will certainly come up with weird subjects. I have a couple of questions. here. Public school kids come from diverse family backgrounds. How does this SEL treat those kids whose parents do not agree with LGBTQC propaganda? So the United Nations has set a goal to eliminate genital mutilations worldwide by 2030. The UN is against this because of scientific reasons. Mutilation is harmful at many levels, so why is the West Hartford Public School choose to teach contrary to science? Or do the school administration think our kids' genitalia are uniquely resistant to any harm? In wrapping up my speech, I strongly oppose the SEL gender identity curriculum and demand it be removed from the school, public school ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? And I will share if there are. We have space for just one more comment in regard to social emotional learning. Again, we cap at 21 minutes per topic. Is there anyone else that cares to speak in general, but this is the last opportunity to comment on SEL subject matters? Any other comments?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Wagner. I live at Harvest Lane here in West Hartford, Connecticut. And I don't have any prepared remarks because I didn't actually come here planning to make any remarks, but did want to listen to other members of the community on the SEL topic, which is what I was going to comment on. I did grow up here in West Hartford and was largely a product of the West Hartford Public Schools until the end of middle school. And a previous speaker talked about feeling part of a community. And one of the reasons I left the West Hartford Public Schools was because I did not feel part of a community. And I didn't exactly know why at the time, what it was that made me feel a lack of connection. I think it was a lack of understanding, a lack of visibility, a lack of language within my community about something that I was struggling with. Now I'm the parent of 4 kids that have gone through, and 3 of whom are still in the West Hartford Public Schools, who are facing comments from their peers in elementary school grades about the fact that they have 2 parents of the same gender. So in response to the comments about this not being an appropriate topic for children in elementary school grades, I just want to make sure the members of the board and the members of this community are aware of the fact that children are discussing these topics anyway. And I'm very grateful for the work that the school district has done in developing this curriculum to help give students the vocabulary to talk about these things in a respectful way with one another. And I think that that's very important for my family, and I think it's very important for students who are not from families like ours to be able to talk about these issues in a respectful way. And so I just wanted to express that I know it was said earlier that not enough people are coming out in support of this because often we're just grateful that it's there. So I just wanted to stand up and thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on any other subject matter? Hearing none, we will continue on with the agenda and move to our executive session. 2 topic areas to be covered. 1, discussion concerning the appointment of an interim superintendent of schools, and the second, possible action concerning the appointment of an interim superintendent of schools. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. We shall return.
This book is the highlight of my night. Somewhere safe with somebody good. That's what I want.
Wait till they.
It doesn't.
You're always thinking, because you're media experienced, that's not a good background for you. All right, are you ready?
So team, thank you so very much. Productive time was had, and as we know, the purpose for the executive session was discussion concerning the appointment of an interim superintendent of schools and possible action concerning the appointment of an interim superintendent of schools. And from our discussion, we do have an action. And with that, would like to put forth a motion. A motion that in accordance with Section 10-157 of the Connecticut General Statutes, the West Hartford Board of Education appoints Dr. Andrew Murrow as interim superintendent of schools effective July 1, 2022, and continuing through June 30th, 2023, or until such time when a new superintendent of schools is appointed, whichever comes first, and moved further that the board chairperson be authorized to finalize and execute a contract of employment for Dr. Murrow's service as interim superintendent. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All of the ayes have it. Dr. Murrow, thank you so very much. So as we know, this takes effect July 1st. However, sure, there will be some transfer of knowledge. You've been here quite a long time, so you certainly have that. But we are fortunate to continue to have our time with Mr. Moore, and we'll use that up until the end of June. But nonetheless, we'll continue with our path forward. So now that we have our Personnel Committee, we have an interim superintendent appointed. Our next charge now is to work on identifying a consultant firm to facilitate our steps moving forward. With that, teammates, seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned at 10:24.